books that priests confiscated and burned, books that monarchs sealed inside royal archives and never catalogued, books that scholars copied in secret and signed with false names, then buried alongside their own bodies so no one else could use them. Some of those manuscripts still sit in locked collections today, restricted from general access. We call them grimoires. And here is the part that almost nobody seems to want to discuss honestly. The warnings written inside them are not there to protect you from the text. They are the text, the names you must never pronounce, the sigils you must never trace, the pacts you must never sign. Welcome. This channel is dedicated to the darker corners of esoteric history, and tonight we open 4 of these books. From each one, a single name, the entity its own author warned should never be called. What follows is esoteric tradition and religious folklore. Read closely. I am not making metaphysical claims, but the same warnings surface, century after century, in manuscripts that never shared a library, written by men who never corresponded, and some patterns persist for reasons we do not entirely understand. That deserves careful attention, not dismissal, and not credulity. These sources still matter because institutions still treat them with unusual caution. The Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington restricts physical handling of its most sensitive acquisitions. Princeton's Garrett collection requires supervised access for specific manuscripts. These are not dusty irrelevancies. They are live documents that serious archivists still consider worth protecting. If the darker corners of esoteric history fascinate you, subscribe. Every week we read what was never meant to be read. Step inside the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., and you are standing in one of the most carefully controlled rare book environments in the world. The Folger holds over 250,000 books, 11,000 manuscripts, and one acquisition that arrived in 1958 without fully revealing what it was. Staff catalogued it as a miscellaneous early modern manuscript. It sat in the collection for decades, consulted occasionally by scholars who noticed something strange. 44 pages had been surgically removed, not torn, cut, with a blade and with patience, by someone who knew exactly which pages they were taking. The manuscript is a working grimoire. Practical instructions, ritual diagrams, invocation sequences, the kind of document that was never meant to be deposited in a library at all. The tradition surrounding it holds that its final owner, identity still disputed, directed that it be buried with him, sealed inside his coffin, because he believed the text was too dangerous to leave in circulation. The legend continues that the book was removed from the burial site within a generation of his death by a student who had watched him use it and wanted what was inside. Supposedly, that student removed the 44 pages himself before passing the remaining manuscript on, keeping the most sensitive material separate, portable, concealable. In 2007, 49 years after the Folger acquired the main manuscript, those missing pages surfaced at a London auction. A private collector purchased them. The Folger was notified. Negotiations followed. The pages were eventually reunited with the manuscript, and for the first time in nearly half a century, scholars could read the text in sequence. What they found on page 206 stopped several of them. The word abracadabra appears there, not as decoration, not as a casual insertion. It is written in a triangular diminishing pattern, each line dropping one letter, collapsing the word toward a single A at the bottom. That formation is ancient, traced back to the Roman physician Quintus Serenus Simonicus in the 3rd century, used as a fever charm. But here it marks the sealed boundary of the manuscript's final section. It is not a spell. Read that again. It is a lock. The text that follows the triangle is the material the 44 missing pages were protecting. The abracadabra formation was the threshold marker. Cross it, and you were in the territory the author considered most restricted. I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say stop. It does not say forbidden. It presents the triangle as a formal opening, a ritual acknowledgement that you are now entering a different register of the text. The reader is assumed to know what that means. Not the symbol, the thing. The scholars who reconstructed the manuscript's hidden order used the blue page numbers, a secondary numbering system written in a different ink, running parallel to the standard foliation. Those blue numbers do not follow the same sequence. They create an alternate reading path through the manuscript, a second document embedded inside the first. The grimoire has 2 versions of itself, and only one of them is visible if you read it in the order the library catalogued it. The entity named in that final restricted section carries a name with a specific etymology. The root is the Hebrew Belial, meaning without worth or without ascending, depending on the scholarly tradition you follow. A name that is itself a verdict. The text does not describe this entity as evil in the conventional sense. It describes it as unbound, outside the hierarchies that govern both angelic and demonic orders, answerable to no authority the text recognizes. There is no verified record of who originally owned this manuscript. The burial story is legend, and I want to be direct about that. The provenance trail goes cold before it reaches any named individual. But what fascinates me about the legend is its internal logic. Someone removed 44 pages before letting the manuscript circulate. Someone used a blade, not haste. That is a decision made by a person who understood the text well enough to know which pages were the dangerous ones and wanted to keep that danger close. The manuscript was buried in plain sight inside one of the most respected libraries in the world. It sat there for decades, incomplete, waiting. Some texts do not need to be hidden. They only need to be misunderstood long enough. Now, if you walk into the Bavarian State Library in Munich today and ask to see catalogue item CLM 849, a librarian will bring you a 15th century manuscript bound in worn leather that looks, from the outside, like any other medieval academic text. It is not. CLM 849 is known to scholars as the Munich Manual of Demonic Magic, and it is one of the most forensically detailed necromantic handbooks to survive the Middle Ages. The historian Richard Kirchheffer spent years analyzing it for his 1997 study, and what he found was not a collection of folklore. It was a working technical document, specific, procedural, written for someone who intended to use it. The legend attached to the Munich Manual is not about who wrote it. Nobody knows who wrote it. The legend is about what the rituals inside it were designed to accomplish. The tradition tells us that one of the central operations in CLM 849, a summoning rite for the entity Astaroth, required the operator to use their own blood as ink when copying the invocation, not symbolic blood, not a ceremonial drop. The text reportedly specifies a quantity. The legend continues that any operator who completed the rite correctly would receive knowledge of hidden things, secrets of the dead, locations of buried treasure, the private sins of living men. Supposedly, several practitioners across the 15th and 16th centuries attempted it. The tradition does not record that any of them succeeded. It records only that they tried. But here is the line from the Munich Manual that has made scholars genuinely uncomfortable for 500 years. The instruction reads, and I am quoting directly from Kirchheffer's translation, "Let the operator write the name in his own blood, upon virgin parchment, that the spirit may recognize the debt already owed." Read that again. Not the name written in blood as an act of power, the blood as evidence of a debt already owed. The text does not say the ritual creates an obligation. It says the obligation exists before the ritual begins. I want you to notice what that implies. The operator is not summoning Astaroth from outside. According to this text, the operator is acknowledging something that is already in place, not the symbol. The contract, Astaroth. The name comes from Astarte, the Phoenician goddess of love, war, and the evening star, worshipped across the ancient Near East for thousands of years before the Hebrew tradition absorbed her and reclassified her. Astarte became Astaroth. The goddess became a duke of hell. A name that was once an act of devotion became, by linguistic and theological drift, an act of transgression. There is no verified historical account of anyone successfully summoning Astaroth using the Munich Manual. Not one. What the historical record does show is that the ritual, as described, is almost certainly designed to fail. Kirchheffer and other scholars of medieval magic have noted that the blood writing instruction contains a deliberate ambiguity. The quantity specified is medically dangerous to extract in one sitting. Whether that was an error, a test, or an intentional barrier is not something the manuscript explains. But what fascinates me about the design of this ritual is its internal logic. It does not promise power. It promises recognition. The system is not offering you something. It is telling you that you already owe something. That is a very different kind of trap. From Munich, we move forward, roughly 1 century, and then forward again, and then forward again, all the way to a library that did not exist when CLM 849 was written, holding a manuscript that has only just been catalogued. The trap gets more sophisticated the closer you get to the present. Follow the Atlantic coast, north and west, leave the old world entirely, and arrive at Princeton, New Jersey, home of one of the most prestigious research universities on Earth. Princeton's Firestone Library holds hundreds of rare manuscripts. Most of them are known quantities, catalogued, studied, cited. But in 2025, Princeton Special Collections quietly acquired a document that does not fit neatly into any existing category. It is an 18th century manuscript, approximately 26 pages long, with no verified author and no clear provenance chain before the 19th century. Scholars are still working out what exactly it is. What they have established so far is strange enough on its own. The manuscript opens, innocuously enough, with 71 psalms, handwritten, carefully arranged, devotional in tone. If you were a librarian in 1780 and someone handed you this document, you would file it under religious texts and move on with your day. That is almost certainly what someone intended, because if you keep reading past those 71 psalms, the text shifts. The tradition of sacred camouflage, hiding operational magical material inside devotional frameworks, is well documented in grimoire scholarship. But what is unusual here, according to early analysis, is the structural sophistication of the concealment. The psalms are not random. They are selected and arranged to mirror the invocation material that follows, creating a kind of theological cover story for what is functionally a working manual derived, at its spine, from Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa's De Occulta Philosophia, published in 1531. Here is what almost nobody is discussing yet about this manuscript. Embedded within the later sections are a series of prophecies, dated, specific, running from 1740 to 1990, and they are written in the past tense, as if the author already knew. The tradition of post-dated prophecy, writing predictions after the fact and presenting them as foreknowledge, is ancient and well understood by historians. But here is the line that stops you cold when you read it. One entry, referring to an event in the 1790s, reads simply, "And the throne fell, as it was told, and the blood was the ink of the new age." Let that sit for a moment. The throne fell, the blood was the ink. Written, supposedly, 50 years before the French Revolution. I want you to notice what the text does not say. It does not name a country. It does not name a king. It leaves the referent open, so that almost any political collapse in the relevant period could be read as the fulfillment. That is not prophecy. That is a mechanism, a device for making the reader feel that the text knows more than they do. Agrippa. The name comes from the Latin cognomen Agrippa, of uncertain origin, possibly from the Greek for born feet first, a birth omen associated in Roman tradition with difficulty and destiny. Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa von Nettesheim, a name that carries its own mythology. No credible historian believes this manuscript was written before the events it describes. The linguistic and material analysis is not complete, but the early indicators point to an 18th century composition date, which places it after most of its own prophecies. That is the historical verdict. But what fascinates me about the internal logic of this document is what it reveals about its intended audience. It was not written for skeptics. It was written for believers who needed confirmation. The Psalms say, "This is holy." The prophecies say, "This is true." The Agrippa material says, "This is powerful." 3 different forms of authority, layered into 26 pages. Whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing. Some texts are not written to open doors. They are written to make you believe the doors were always open and that you were always meant to walk through them. Step back now, back across the Atlantic, back across several centuries, back to a tradition that predates the Princeton manuscript, predates the Munich manual, predates almost everything we have discussed in this video. The Liber Juratus Honorii, the Sworn Book of Honorius, is a 13th century grimoire that survives in multiple manuscript copies scattered across European libraries, including versions held in the British Library and the Bodleian at Oxford. The scholar Gösta Hedegaard produced the first modern critical edition in 2002, cataloguing the manuscript variants and establishing the text's history with as much precision as the surviving evidence allows. What he found was a document that had been copied, recopied, and circulated for at least 400 years before print culture made it redundant. It did not die. It traveled. The legend attached to the Sworn Book is, structurally, the most audacious of any grimoire in the Western tradition. The tradition tells us that the book was compiled at a secret council of 89 magicians, convened after the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, ordered the destruction of all magical texts, and the execution of all who practiced magic. Supposedly, these 89 masters gathered to preserve their knowledge in a single volume, sworn to secrecy by an oath that, the legend continues, would kill any practitioner who revealed the contents to the uninitiated. The supreme irony, and the text itself seems aware of this, is that the sworn book claims papal authorization for its own operations. It presents itself as sanctioned by the very institution that, according to the same legend, tried to destroy it. A forbidden object that claims to be permitted. That is not a contradiction. That is a very deliberate paradox, built into the document's identity. The entity at the center of the sworn book's most significant operations is Baal, listed in the Goetia as the first king among the 72 spirits reputedly sealed by Solomon. Here is the passage that has circulated among ceremonial magicians for centuries. The text reads, "Baal appeareth in divers shapes, sometimes like a cat, sometimes like a toad, and sometimes like a man, and sometimes all these forms at once." Read that again. Sometimes all these forms at once, not shape-shifting, simultaneous multiplicity. The text is not saying Baal changes, it is saying Baal is not one thing. I want you to notice what that does to the logic of the ritual. If the entity you are attempting to summon has no stable form, how do you know when it has arrived? How do you know what you are speaking to? The text does not answer this question, not the form. The uncertainty. Baal. The name is Semitic, meaning lord, master, owner. It was a title before it was a name, applied across the ancient Near East to local deities, to husbands, to property owners. A word so common it became a category. Then the Hebrew prophets weaponized it, and Baal became the enemy, the false god, the name you were not supposed to speak. Baal, in the Goetia, is Baal wearing a new spelling, a name that is itself a history of conquest. There is no record that any pope authorized the sworn book of Honorius. Hedegaard and other scholars are unambiguous on this point. The papal authorization claim is a literary fiction, a rhetorical strategy to give the text institutional weight it did not possess. That is the historical verdict. But what fascinates me about the internal logic of this claim is what it tells us about the psychology of forbidden knowledge. The book does not say, "We defy the church." It says, "The church, at its highest level, secretly approves." It converts the source of prohibition into the source of permission. That is not theology. That is a power structure being turned inside out. All four of the books we have examined share one structural feature that almost nobody talks about openly. And the closer is where we finally name it. I need to flag a critical conflict in your instructions before proceeding. The writing directions for sections 7 and 8 specify 150 to 280 words and 20 to 45 words respectively, with detailed multi-beat structures. But the word count constraint at the bottom says 7 to 10 words total for each section, and the chunk total is 15 to 21 words.